I'm Kathleen. I'm a cartoonist and illustrator based in Vancouver, and today, thanks to VanCaf, I'm going to talk through some of the basic ideas you should be thinking about if you're ready to start working with a publisher. I know that from the outside, publishers in the publishing industry can seem kind of mysterious and confusing. My hope with this video is to make things a little less mysterious and to make you feel empowered. Right off the bat, let's talk about the types of comic publishers you're going to encounter. Here's my disclaimer. I'm not going to talk about the big superhero publishers in this video. My experience with publishing is focused more on literary publishers and small comics publishers. If you're looking to get published by one of the big superhero companies, someone else is going to have more accurate information that will serve you better. However, if you're looking to make a standalone graphic novel, this video is for you. I'm a writer and an artist, as in I write and illustrate all my books. That is where my experience lies, and that is the point of view I will be speaking from in this video. If you are just a writer or just an artist, the process of getting published is going to look a little bit different for you. So, when you're looking for a home for your comic, there are two main types of publishers you are going to come across. There are independent publishers who exclusively focus on comics. These publishers tend to publish on a smaller scale, but are very well versed in comics as an art form, as well as what sets it apart from other book publishing, like novels, etc. Independent publishers tend to have specific niches that they cater to, so that may be certain genres, audience types, or even courting artists from specific geographic regions or identities. These publishers often have open submissions and welcome submissions from unagented artists and writers. There are traditional book publishers who mainly publish novels. These publishers tend to publish on a larger scale and cater towards the widest audience possible. They have much larger reach with regards to distribution and marketing. Distribution is just how your books get into stores. These publishers usually have closed submissions and only welcome submissions from agented artists and writers. So how do I know which type of publisher I should look into? There are pros and cons to working with both independent publishers and traditional book publishers. Choosing which path is right for you is really going to depend on your artistic goals. I've worked with both and enjoyed both experiences for different reasons. With independent publishers, you may have a lot more creative control over every aspect of the book and much looser editorial oversight. You may also be able to speak to much more niche subjects with your work, ones that a larger publisher might consider quote-unquote difficult to market. You will see a much smaller advance, but you may see higher royalty percentages. With traditional book publishers, you will have less creative control over most aspects of the book, and there will be much more rigorous editorial oversight. You will get a lot of feedback, which can be very helpful for your creative growth. You will definitely see a much bigger advance than with a smaller publisher, but your royalty percentages may be smaller. None of these things are better or worse, they're just different, and depending on what you're looking for from a publishing experience, you may find one suits your needs better than the other. Okay, so what publishers specifically should I be looking at? Well, go to a big bookstore, check out the different titles in the comics section. There are usually several comic sections separated by age. Take note of what kind of books, whether that be genre, subject matter, etc., that are put out by each publisher. Do the same at an independent bookstore. You can also take note of who publishes your favorite comics. Think about whether you can see your work fitting into the genres or subject matters that you're seeing from those publishers. For example, if you're working on a romance comic and you notice that publisher X is putting out a lot of romance content, that may be a great fit for you. However, if you notice that publisher Y is only putting out adventure comics and memoirs, they may not be a great home to send your slice of life romance, you know? Alright, so I've got an idea of which publishers I want to work with. What now? Here is where the two roads diverge in the comics wood. First, I'm going to talk about pitching to independent publishers, and second, I'm going to talk about pitching to traditional book publishers. So, pitching to indie publishers. Graphic novels with indie publishers are often pitched based on a complete work, which means that your comic is either done or close to done. Indie publishers who have open submissions will have a submissions page on their website. On that page, they will have detailed guidelines to follow for submitting work to them. Read those guidelines carefully and follow them to the letter. If you're confused by any guidelines or have questions, don't be afraid to reach out and ask for clarification. It is extremely important to follow a publisher's guidelines as they are set out. If they ask you to submit a certain file type, make sure that you're submitting that file type. If they ask for files to be labeled in a specific way, label them that way. You might think it's silly, but publishers ask for these things for a reason. They want it to be as easy as possible for them to sort through pitches and enjoy yours. If you make it harder for them, they may simply skip your pitch because they have too many others to read and it is not worth it to figure yours out if it's not formatted correctly. It also just sets a professional precedent. If you can't follow simple guidelines for your pitch, how can they be certain that you'll follow important guidelines during the publishing process, such as making sure that your comic pages are drawn to the correct dimensions and resolutions for print? Now let's talk about pitching to traditional book publishers. This is generally a more involved process, at least in my experience, because for most traditional book publishers, you need an agent to be able to get your foot in the door. I'm not going to cover querying agents here, because it is a very involved topic that could really be its own video. But if you want to learn more about it, querying is the word that we use when we speak about reaching out to agents to see if they'll represent you. So just look up querying agents and you should find some really great resources. Basically here, I'm going to talk about the process of pitching to publishers, and there's a lot of overlap with pitching to publishers and pitching to agents, so you may still find it valuable. Graphic novels with traditional book publishers are generally pitched based on a concept and not on a complete work. Cartoonists put together a pitch package which essentially breaks down the book that they want to make and gives editors a sense of what the final product would look like. A pitch package contains a plot synopsis, character designs, sample art, and sample script. So for the plot synopsis, I always try to have a short synopsis and a long synopsis. The short synopsis gives a general overview of the book and mentions the most important themes or concepts that would grab a reader's attention. It's basically an elevator pitch. I try to keep it around 1, maybe 2 paragraphs. The long synopsis details every single thing that will happen in your book. Mine tend to be about several thousand words. You will spoil the ending in this summary. You want to break down the whole story from start to finish. Do not let anything go unsaid. Basically, the short synopsis is there to let people make informed decisions about whether or not they want to read the long synopsis. The character designs are pretty straightforward. Editors and art directors just want to see what the characters they're reading about in your plot synopsis look like. And the sample art. Usually we want to aim for about 10 pages of sample art, and these should be 10 pages of your comic. This is not 10 random illustrations to show off your style. It is 10 pages of your comic to show what your sequential storytelling chops are. It's 10 pages of your comic to show that you actually know how to draw comics and you do it well. Because drawing a comic page is very different than drawing a single illustration. And here's something to keep in mind when you're drawing your sample pages. While you absolutely want to put in, as much effort as possible and make them really representative of how fantastic your art and storytelling are, there's a really good chance that you will end up not using these pages in your graphic novel if it gets picked up. Since you're pitching on a concept, there may be plot or character details that you and your editor decide to change later, which then would change what's happening on those pages. Out of all of the books that I've pitched that have had sample pages as part of the pitch, I don't think any of those sample pages have made it into my finished graphic novel. And of course, we also have the sample script. I personally have always submitted sample scripts that were about 20 pages long, but I've also seen agents ask for up to 50 pages of sample script. Like I said at the top of this video, I write and draw all my own work. I don't really work with other writers or artists. However, I still have to be able to write a coherent script. Working with a big publisher, your work gets passed around to several different teams and different people during the process of its creation. So your script cannot be something that only makes sense to you. I think a lot of us cartoonists are very used to working alone and only working with ourselves. But in working with a big publisher, you have to get really comfortable with expressing your ideas to other people as well. So basically, the point of the sample script is to showcase how you write and to make sure that you can produce a coherent script. Once you have a pitch package together, your agent will send it out to various publishers and you will cross your fingers and hope it resonates with an editor. Oh wow, a publisher is interested. What happens next? Now we get to think about contracts. So a contract is an agreement between you and your publisher that says who is responsible for what in the process of publishing this book. If you have an agent, your agent and their agency will look over the contract and there will be a back and forth with the publisher to negotiate the terms and compensation. Even if you have an agent, you should be reading over your contracts carefully. If something doesn't make sense, ask questions. Your agent is there to help answer those questions, and if they aren't sure of the answer, they have a legal team that they can consult to find the answer. One of the biggest red flags in publishing is if you have questions for a publisher or an agent and they get weird about answering them, or they get defensive about answering them. Both publisher and an agent should be really open to answering your questions about the contracts and documents that they're showing you. If you don't have an agent, like say you're going with a smaller publisher, you should absolutely be reading your contracts carefully. It's also a really good idea to get a second pair of eyes, someone like a lawyer, to look over the contract as well. And if you decide to have a lawyer look over the contract, you should have an idea of what you want to get out of this publishing agreement. Because again, it's an agreement. It's kind of a conversation between you and the publisher. You should think about the things that you want to benefit from with this contract. You should want to retain things like the copyright of your work, which is making sure that the characters that you create belong to you and not the publisher. You want to make sure you understand what publishing rights you are offering to the publisher. Is it just English language? Is it international? Those are things you want to pay attention to. You should also want to know what happens if either you or the publisher do not hold up your end of what was agreed upon in the contract. And when having a lawyer look over your contract, you should really communicate to them what it is you are hoping they look for. Are you concerned about the wording in the section about rights and copyright? Are you confused by the structure of the royalty payments? Having clear questions will help you get valuable answers. So yeah, I kind of mentioned these, but I'll go over them again. These are some useful parts of the contract to look at, or just things I'm looking out for when I'm looking at contracts. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an agent. I actually don't negotiate my own contracts because I have an agent and she's fantastic. But I do still read my contracts through thoroughly and make sure that I understand them as well as I can. Because it's something I'm signing and I want to make sure that I'm signing something I agree with. So like I said earlier, make sure that you retain your copyright. No opportunity for publication is good enough to take your characters and stories away from you. A phrase I like to look for in contracts is the phrase in perpetuity. This phrase means forever. So I just want to make sure that I'm okay with the publisher having what they want in perpetuity if that phrase comes up. Another clause that I always make sure I'm reading through really thoroughly is the clause that answers the question, what happens if you want to get out of this contract? So if for whatever reason, halfway through the process, you realize that there is just literally no way you can finish this book, what are the stakes and what are the repercussions of that decision? As well, you want to make sure you know what you and the publisher are agreeing will happen if the publisher decides that they no longer want to be publishing your work, and make sure that you're comfortable with those answers. A term that often comes up with contracts and publishing, especially book publishing, is publishers asking for the right of first refusal on future projects. This means that they want to be the first person to say yes or no to publishing your next book once you finish your current project with them. So here are a few important things to keep in mind for the right of first refusal. The right of first refusal should always have strict parameters. It should be the publisher specifying that they want right of first refusal on your next work, but specifying the age range of the audience for that work. So if you've been doing middle grade or young adult graphic novels for that publisher, they will specify that it will be for your next middle grade or young adult graphic novel. As well, it will be specifying that format. For example, if you've been making graphic novels with them, specifying that it's for your next graphic novel and not necessarily for your next prose novel. As well, upon receiving the pitch, they will specify that they have a time limit within which they get to decide whether or not they want to publish it. Often this is something like 30 to 60 days. This time limit is really important. If there was no time limit, the publisher could hold your pitch hostage in perpetuity, forever. And they could just say, oh, we're still deciding. We haven't decided yet, and just have that pitch hostage. So knowing that they only get that right of first refusal for a set amount of time means that once that time is up, if they've said yes, then yay, you get to make another book with them. If they say no, it's not really a big deal. You and your agent will then be free to take that pitch to other publishers. A new clause that is starting to be included in contracts is one pertaining to AI. This is really great and you should definitely ask for it if you don't see it in a contract. Basically, you want yourself and your publisher to agree that neither party will feed any part of your book into an AI engine or trading model or whatever. It really sucks that we have to think about this, but as creatives, it's really good to know that these clauses are being added in and hopefully becoming industry standards. So another big part of contracts is advances and royalties. An advance is what you get paid to make the book. It is usually paid in multiple installments, so while it may initially look like a big number, you're actually not getting all of that money at once. The installment schedule will be specified in your contract. It usually looks something like a third of the advance is paid upon signing the contract, a third of the advance is paid somewhere in the middle of the process, either finishing the script or finishing the pencils, and then a third of the advance is paid upon completion and acceptance of the final art. Acceptance means that the publisher is happy with the work and no more edits are requested. Royalties are what you get paid after the book is published. It is a percentage of the price of the paperback, the hardcover, or the ebook. These will probably all be different percentages. You won't see any money from royalties unless you earn out your advance. Basically, your book needs to sell enough copies to cover the cost of your advance before you can be paid royalties. Most books with traditional publishers do not earn out their advances, so make peace with that now and don't bank on royalties as being future money. However, with smaller publishers, the advance is usually significantly smaller and easier to earn out, so you have a higher probability of seeing royalties with a smaller publisher. So you've gone through the wonderful process of getting a pitch together, you've submitted it either to an agent or through an agent or just on your own to various different publishers, but unfortunately it's been rejected. What do you do now? So unfortunately, in the book industry, we just have to get super, super comfortable with rejection. It's just part of the process. It sucks, it's not fun, it doesn't feel great, you're absolutely allowed to privately mope, but at a certain point you just have to get used to it and remember that a rejection is not necessarily a reflection of your talent or your skills. Sometimes a pitch is rejected because a publisher already has a book in production that is in the same genre for the same audience, so they don't want to bring on something that similar. Sometimes a pitch is rejected because you're pitching your superhero epic to a publishing house that specializes in memoirs. It's just not the right fit. Sometimes it's because your creative vision and the creative vision of the editor simply do not match up. And sometimes it really is because you're just not ready. I've certainly had my fair share of rejections where when I was able to look at them in hindsight, I realized I really wasn't ready for the opportunity at that moment, but having the experience of putting together a pitch that got rejected helped me be that much stronger when I was ready to pitch the next time. When you get rejected by a publisher, you will probably not get any feedback on why your pitch was rejected. Publishers are simply too busy. They see way too many pitches to be able to offer detailed feedback for all of them. And sometimes that can feel really frustrating, but that's just how it is. The best thing to do is to keep moving forward. Just because someone said no now doesn't mean that you're always going to hear no. The more you create, the more you pitch, the better you're going to get at it. And your unique voice is incredible and no one can tell the story you're telling. So never forget that. Just really, you gotta believe in yourself. Oh, one more thing before I go. This does not pertain to anyone who's looking to get published, but if you do have the great fortune of getting your book published and you are a Canadian cartoonist, please, please, please remember in the back of your mind about the public lending right. I would be totally remiss if I didn't mention the public lending right in this video, because if you do get published and you have a book out there that does have an ISBN number and you're a Canadian cartoonist, go apply for the public lending right. It's a program that compensates authors for the copies of their books that are circulated in Canadian public libraries, and it is a very helpful check every February, especially if you aren't going to earn out your advance and aren't seeing royalties. Again, you can't think about this until you're actually published, but definitely keep it in the back of your mind because it's really, really cool. So this video is really like publishing 101. because of the length, I'm not really able to get into like the real nitty-gritty, the real specifics of all the subjects that I've talked about today. I hope they've given you something to think about and something to think about further and research further if you're interested in getting your graphic novel published. I wanted to provide a couple additional shoutouts or resources at the end of this video. This video was mostly based on my own experience with the publishing industry, both from inside a small publisher and as an artist working with larger publishers and working with smaller publishers. However, my experience cannot cover everything, and I think especially with something like an industry like publishing, you really want to get a bunch of different perspectives. So here's a couple resources that I would recommend that I think all of these individuals have really wonderful points of views and interesting, in-depth things to say about the topics that I've discussed here. So this first resource, you can find it on itch.io. This is called The Comic Creator's Guide to Literary Agents by Danielle Juadico and Jessin Winbow. It is a guide in comic form all about literary agents, especially for cartoonists. Second resource is the amazing Anusha Syed's YouTube channel. She has just like an incredible wealth of knowledge, more specifically geared towards children's book illustration, but still within book publishing nonetheless. And I think she does a really, really wonderful job in sharing her experience and opinions and insights into the industry, so definitely check that out. As well, a blog that you may find really useful is Maria Vicente's resources page on her blog. She is an agent and she talks really in depth about everything pertaining to being agented, especially when it comes to graphic novels. And lastly, if you are looking for an agent, again, I couldn't really get into it in this video because that would be a whole separate video, but check out Manuscript Wishlist. It is a website where editors and agents let authors know what they're looking for in the stories that are pitched to them, and also lets you know whether or not their submissions are open. So we're basically at the end of my video. I hope that this was helpful. I hope you got some insight into the publishing industry and what to think about as you're building up work and moving towards pitching to publishers. I wish you the best of luck on your publication journey. I am totally rooting for you. And if you feel like checking out my work at all, my name is Kathleen and you can usually find me at CAG Comics on whatever platform, or at my website, cagcomics.com. Thank you to VanCaf for letting me make this video, and I'll see you at the festival.